It had been 6 months since Claire's sentencing. 6 months since the courtroom echoed with the hollow clank of justice and the words, 30 years without parole. The warehouse confrontation, the sting operation, Mercer's vanishing act, all of it seemed like a dream now. A dark, surreal haze that haunted the edges of the protagonist's sleep. He'd moved to a quieter part of the city, a small loft above an old bookstore in Northside. It was modest, but it was his. No shared spaces soaked in lies, no memories whispering from the walls, just peace, or something like it. Sophia visited occasionally. She had been patient, supportive, but she too bore scars from Claire's manipulations. They were figuring it out, slowly. Two survivors walking cautiously through a field littered with old landmines. But peace never lasted long in his world. It started with a letter, no return address, just his name written in bold ink, slanted, as if done in a hurry. Inside, a Polaroid photo, a blurry image of David Mercer, beaten, bruised, and sitting in what looked like a motel room. A note was taped to the back. "She isn't done." He took the photo to his private investigator, Calloway. The man had been out of the game for a few months now, retired to Arizona. But the second he saw the handwriting on the note, all the blood drained from his face. "It's Vance," he muttered. "That's his style. Vague messages, psychological games. He's pulling the strings now. Claire was the fire. He's the smoke." The news hit harder than he expected. Claire might have been behind bars, but Vance was still out there, and now Mercer was a pawn, or bait. The protagonist stared out the window later that night, whiskey glass trembling in his hand. He thought about the way Claire used to smirk when she knew something he didn't. The way she whispered checkmate, even when the game wasn't over. Had she planned this from her prison cell? Or had Vance taken the reins, steering the chaos she left behind? Either way, the message was clear. The game wasn't over, and this time he would have to finish it, once and for all. He didn't sleep that night. He just sat in his chair, staring at that Polaroid of Mercer, the man who betrayed him, beaten and stripped of that smug confidence. There was no satisfaction in seeing him like that, only a deeper unease. By morning, he made the call. "Calloway," he said, voice flat. "I'm going to Sycamore Motel." "You're walking into a trap." "Probably, but I'm done playing defense." The motel sat on the edge of a forgotten highway, tucked behind a rusting chain-link fence and half buried in dry leaves. Room 6A, the same number that showed up in the police reports from months ago when Mercer disappeared. The front desk. Clerk didn't even ask questions, just slid a key across the counter with a cigarette hanging from her lip. The room smelled like mildew and ammonia. Faded curtains hung like tired ghosts. But it was the bloodstain under the bed that caught his eye. Brown, dry, and shaped like a boot print. There were no signs of a struggle. No David Mercer. But on the nightstand sat a small cassette player. Old school. He pressed play. Click. Claire's voice crackled through the static, distant and calm. "Did you really think a cage could stop me? Elliot's always been good with doors and people, especially scared ones like David." Pause. Faint breathing. "You hurt me, betrayed me. Now I get to show you what that feels like. Piece by piece. You won't know what's real anymore. And when you're ready to beg, he'll be waiting." Click. The tape whirred to a stop. He stood there for a long moment, feeling that old fire ignite in his chest again. Not rage, not fear, but focus. Claire was orchestrating this from the inside, which meant someone was getting messages in and out of the prison. He needed eyes on the inside. That night, he met Sophia at her apartment. She opened the door in a robe, hair damp from the shower. She hadn't heard from him in a few days and looked worried. "Hey," she said softly. "You okay?" He handed her the tape recorder. She's talking to me again. From prison. Sophia froze, then played the message. When it ended, she was silent for a long beat. I know someone, she said. My cousin worked corrections at Fairview before transferring. She might be able to tell us who's visiting Claire, or passing messages. He nodded. I need every name, every guard, every inmate she's spoken to. Sophia looked him in the eye. You're going back to war, aren't you? No, he said. I'm going to end it. Fairview Correctional was a fortress of brick and concrete, cold, inhuman, clinical. From the outside, it looked like just another prison. But from the inside, secrets moved like whispers through air vents and glances across mess halls. And Claire? Claire was still pulling strings like a puppeteer behind glass. Sophia's cousin, Angela, met them in the back of a diner just off Route 12. Her face was tight, lined by stress. Her voice was low. I shouldn't even be talking to you. They monitor us even after transfer. He leaned in. We need names. Who's been seeing Claire? Angela took a long sip of her coffee, then slid over a manila envelope. She's had 3 unofficial visits in the last month. None logged under her name, but security footage still tagged them. I copied what I could. He opened it. Photos. Still frames. One face blurred by a baseball cap and scarf, but the height, the posture. It screamed Elliot Vance. Another man appeared in 2 visits, a corrections officer, clean-shaven, sharp jawline, smiling in that casual, empty way only truly dangerous people do. Angela pointed to him. That's Sergeant Blake Grayson, new, transferred from a private military contractor. No history before 2018. Just appeared on payroll one day. He felt a chill wrap around his spine. And this? He asked, holding up the blurry still of Vance. Angela nodded. We only know him by alias, Devon Hill. Supposed to be dead. Some. Guards say he's FBI. Others say ex-intelligence, but he has full clearance when he walks in. No searches. No questions. Sophia looked between them, worried. So they're still moving freely. Angela's voice was grim. Claire is protected. Whatever this is, it's bigger than her now. Back at his loft, he sat on the edge. Of the bed, photos spread out like tarot cards of doom. Claire wasn't just manipulating one man anymore. She had a network. Vance was the enforcer. Grayson, the inside man. And Mercer? Likely bait? Maybe a hostage? Maybe worse. His phone buzzed. Unknown number, he answered. Tension in every muscle. Static. Then a low voice. Calm, articulate, dangerous. You're looking in the wrong direction. She's not after you anymore. She's after everything you care about. Click. He stared at the screen. Seconds later, another message came in. A photo, Sophia walking into her apartment, taken from across the street. That same sick feeling gripped his chest. They were watching her. Next moves. He moves Sophia into hiding while trying to turn Blake Grayson, the corrupt guard, against Claire and Vance. They uncover that Claire's goal isn't just revenge, it's financial, political, or possibly tied to a larger criminal network. Mercer's location is discovered, but saving him means risking everything. Claire begins leaving riddles and memories behind, triggering psychological breakdowns, blurring past and present. He didn't sleep that night, just kept running scenarios in his mind, how they'd gotten to Sophia, how long they'd been watching, and what message Claire was trying to send. He'd faced fear before. But this was dread with intention. Morning, he made his move. Grayson, the inside man, always left the prison around 7:45 p.m. Routine. Predictable. He drove a matte black Dodge Charger, parked in the far corner of the Fairview staff lot, always facing the exit for a quick escape. The guy had training. Muscle memory never fully relaxed. That evening, in the lot behind the Blue Lantern bar, Grayson found his car already running, and a man sitting in the back seat with a gun resting casually on his thigh. "Drive the protagonist said. "We're going to have a conversation." Grayson didn't argue. 10 minutes later, they were parked near the Riverwalk under an overpass, headlights off, rain misting the windshield. The Glock stayed steady in the rear view. "You know who I am," the protagonist said. "You know what Claire did to me, so let's skip the formalities." Grayson tilted his head slightly. "You think you're the first man Claire hollowed out? I think I'm the only one left breathing." That earned a tight smile, but something flickered in Grayson's eyes. Not fear. Regret. "She gets into your head," Grayson said. "Makes you believe things. Then when she's done, with you she sets Vance loose, and he doesn't leave survivors. So why are you still alive?" Grayson laughed softly. "I've been useful, but lately I get the feeling my expiration date's near." The protagonist leaned forward. "Then help me bring them down, or I swear I'll make sure Vance doesn't get the chance." There was a long silence. Then Grayson reached slowly into his coat, pulled out a flash drive, and dropped it on the center console. "This is everything. Prison logs, visitor footage, communication relays, even footage of Mercer. She's been keeping him in an old CIA black site in the woods outside Fairview. Codename Juniper House. She's using him as leverage." "Leverage for what?" Grayson looked away. "She's selling secrets." "Financial blackmail, data dumps, blackmail files from Mercer's old contacts, and she's about to auction the entire package off to the highest bidder." "Where?" "Juniper House, 2 days from now." The protagonist stared at him. "This ends now." Chapter Juniper House. The building sat camouflaged in the woods, a weathered compound wrapped in security gates, motion sensors, and tall pine trees. It had no official record. It didn't exist on any maps, but it had a pulse. And that pulse was Claire. With Calloway's help and Grayson's inside intel, they put together a plan. He'd go in alone, any more, and it would trigger alarms. Grayson would open the gate remotely. Calloway would monitor comms. And Sophia, relocated and guarded, would stay out of it. He suited up under a gray sky, wearing the same coat he wore the night Claire betrayed him. The irony wasn't lost on him. This time, he wasn't here to survive. He was here to end it. Inside Juniper House, everything was steel, concrete, and quiet. He moved like a ghost, each hallway pulsing with anticipation. 2 guards. Neutralized. 1 camera looped. Heart steady. Then, the door. Room 14B. He kicked it open. Mercer was chained to a chair, battered but alive. Barely. Behind him, standing by the window, was Claire, wearing a black suit, hair tied back, eyes sharp as ever. She smiled. "Hello, darling," she whispered. "Did you miss me?" "Hello, darling," Claire said again, stepping into the glow of the overhead light. "You took your time." He didn't speak, just moved forward, gun steady, eyes locked on hers. Mercer groaned behind him, a weak and broken sound. The man, who once smiled with smug entitlement, now looked like a ghost, skin pale, lips cracked, left eye nearly swollen shut. Claire kept her distance, arms folded, calm, calculated, like she'd orchestrated this scene 1,000 times in her head. "Let him go," the protagonist said, voice low. Claire's eyes flicked toward Mercer. "Oh, he's just a side dish. The real entree is us." He stepped closer, gun aimed square at her chest. "You've lost, Claire. I have Grayson's files. I know about the auction, the buyers, the location. You're out of moves." She chuckled, dry and bitter. "You think this was about revenge? About hurting you?" Her eyes darkened. "No, this was about control. You took mine away the night you exposed me. humiliated me. I needed to remind the world and you who I am. She stepped forward slowly, hands raised in mock surrender. But I didn't bring you here to kill you. He kept the gun up. Then why? Claire nodded behind him. You should ask him. A sudden crash. A door behind him slammed open, too late. The butt of a rifle cracked across his jaw, hard. White light exploded in his vision as he hit the ground. Guns skidding across the cold floor. Boots! Heavy ones! Moving fast! He looked up, dazed. Elliot Vance stood over him, wearing all black, eyes hollow. You should have stayed dead, Vance growled. Chapter, checkmate. They tied him to a chair opposite. Mercer, blood trickled down his temple. Claire stood between them, arms folded like a queen overseeing her last move on the chessboard. You always had a habit of underestimating me, she said softly. Even after everything, even after prison. She turned to Vance. Put him on the feed. Vance activated a small projector on the desk. A live feed appeared. Video broadcast, already being streamed across the dark web to buyers and enemies alike. This, Claire said, pointing to him, is the man who brought down a multi-million-dollar empire, who destroyed everything I built. She walked around him slowly. I want them to watch as I take it all back. She leaned close, whispering against his ear. But first, I want you to feel what I felt in that courtroom. Powerless, alone, exposed. The stream continued, but Claire hadn't accounted for one thing. Grayson. In the control room above, the lights flickered. Claire glanced up, brows twitching. Then, bang! Vance jerked as a bullet tore through his shoulder. He dropped to one knee, snarling in pain. Gunfire. Chaos erupted. Mercer fell sideways, trying to crawl away. Claire screamed something unintelligible as the lights exploded above. The protagonist kicked his chair backward, cracking the bindings as Grayson stormed in from the side entrance, shotgun in hand. Move! Grayson shouted. He grabbed his gun from the floor and turned to Claire, who was already backing toward the rear hall. No more games, Claire, he growled. She froze. Her eyes flickered. No fear this time, only rage. You still don't get it, she hissed. Even if you kill me, I already won. And with that, she tossed a small detonator onto the floor. Grayson dove. An explosion ripped through the hallway as smoke filled the room. When the dust settled, Claire was gone. Chapter, Ashes and Aftermath. They got Mercer out. Barely. Vance was alive but unconscious, left for authorities. Claire vanished into the trees, wounded, hunted, but not done. The data auction was shut down, the buyers exposed, the press had a field day. But peace? Peace was something he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. Epilogue. The letter weeks later, Sophia handed him an envelope, no return address. Inside, one Polaroid. Claire. Standing at a dock somewhere tropical, a fresh scar on her neck, and a child by her side. On the back, in her handwriting, You never really knew me, but I always knew you. See you soon. He stared at it for a long time. Then he burned it, but her face lingered in the smoke, because some endings don't come with peace. They come with a promise. The scars had faded from his face, but not from his sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, on that dock, smiling like she'd never broken anything, like she hadn't torn the world in half. He'd moved to a quiet town north of Ashbridge, the kind with corner bookstores, rain-polished streets, and neighbors who minded their own damn business. Sophia had joined him a month later. They were trying, piece by piece, to build something new, something untouched by blood and betrayal. But the past doesn't die quietly. It breathes through the cracks in the floorboards. He first noticed the surveillance 2 weeks after they moved in, a glint from the tree line. A van parked 2 blocks, a way that never moved. Sophia's phone lighting up at 3:14 a.m. with no caller ID. He said nothing at first, didn't want to worry her, but when he found their mailbox open one morning, and inside, a single playing card, the Queen of Spades, its corners singed, he knew she was watching. Chapter: Sophia's Secret. Sophia noticed the shift. He barely spoke at dinner. Started checking the locks 3 times before bed. He didn't tell her about the card until she told him her secret. "I never told you," she said one night, voice trembling. "When Claire took me, she didn't just threaten me." He froze. "She offered me a deal." "What kind of deal?" Sophia looked away. "She said if I stayed quiet, she'd let me keep you." A long silence fell between them. Rain pattered the windows like nervous fingers. "She said one day you'd come looking for her, and when you did, she'd let you find her, just to see what you'd choose, her or peace." His fists clenched. It was never over, not to Claire. Chapter: The Invitation. A week later, it arrived. An envelope slid under the door, elegant parchment sealed with wax. Inside, a plane ticket. One way, destination, Cartagena, Colombia. Alongside, a single note in Claire's signature looping script. "Still chasing ghosts? Come find me. Let's finish what we started." And below that, a postscript. "Bring Sophia if you trust her." He stared at it for a long time. Claire wasn't just trying to haunt him. She was daring him to finish the game. He didn't tell Sophia he'd booked the ticket. Not until the night before. "You're going," she said, not asked. "And you weren't going to tell me." "I didn't want to drag you into it again," he said quietly. Sophia looked at him, pain flickering in her eyes. "I've been in it since the day she whispered in my ear that I'd never really know you." He hesitated. "She wants to finish this. On her terms." Sophia nodded. "Then we changed the terms." She dropped a folder onto the table. Inside, photos, dossiers, an old Interpol file with Claire's name and a red stamp across the top. Classified, Level 4 threat. "I've been doing my own digging," she said. Claire wasn't just planning revenge. She was setting up dynasties, shell companies in Dubai, art theft in Prague, offshore networks connected to 6 aliases. She's not just hiding, she's growing. He stared at the documents. The dots began to connect in ways they hadn't before. Claire wasn't a ghost. She was becoming a myth. Chapter: Welcome to the Garden Cartagena. Humidity hugged the air like a secret. Music drifted from plazas, colors bloomed in every direction, and somewhere beneath it all, something rotten pulsed. They followed the coordinates Claire had encoded in the ticket's QR metadata. It led them to a boutique hotel tucked between old colonial ruins. No staff, no guests, just a single woman waiting in the lobby. Tall, red dress, face obscured by a wide sun hat. Not Claire, but familiar. "Miss Sophia," the woman said with a slight accent. "You look even more radiant in person." Sophia stiffened. "Do I know you?" "I'm Celine, Claire's liaison. She regrets not greeting you herself, but she wanted to give you something." She handed over a small USB drive and a message. Sophia took it, hand trembling. "What kind of message?" Celine smiled. "A memory." Chapter: The video back in their rented apartment, they plugged in the USB. The screen flickered. Then Claire appeared, sitting in a sunlit garden, a little boy beside her. He looked a lot like him. She stroked the boy's hair, then looked into the camera. "Do you remember the night in Lisbon?" she said, smiling faintly. "You said something that stayed with me. Even monsters want to be understood." "I think I finally understand what you meant." She kissed the boy's head. He squirmed away and ran off screen. "I didn't bring you here to kill you," Claire said softly. "I brought you here to give you a choice. She leaned closer. You can walk away now, or come find me, and learn the truth. The screen went black. Chapter: The Truth Beneath the Garden. He couldn't sleep that night. Sophia sat beside him, silent. You think it's real? She asked finally. I don't know, he admitted, but deep down, something told him it was. That child. The way he moved, his eyes. If Claire had used him as a pawn, if she'd created life out of betrayal, then this wasn't just a final game, it was legacy. The next morning, the sun was merciless. The city of Cartagena had a way of swallowing the horizon, like a dream turned to dust. They couldn't waste time here. Claire's games had already begun, and every hour was a step closer to unraveling. Everything they thought they knew. Sophia had found a map on the back of Claire's letter. No coordinates this time. Just a symbol, a red rose with thorns. The same symbol she'd used during their dealings with Grayson, the rose, the garden. I know where she is, Sophia said quietly. Her fingers traced the map, eyes narrowing. There's an old estate in the hills, not far from here. The estate was notorious. Not for its beauty, but its isolation. An abandoned mansion, forgotten by time but always remembered by those who knew how to get in. Claire had made it her base of operations. Chapter: The Thorns of the Past. The journey up the mountain was brutal. The roads turned from cobblestone to dirt paths, barely wide enough for a car, much less the Jeep they rented. The air was thick with heat, and every inch of the landscape seemed to close in around them like an encroaching forest, hiding the truth under layers of green. They reached the gates by late afternoon. The estate was as abandoned as it was beautiful. A crumbling stone structure, vines crawling over cracked windows. The air hummed with history, but it felt like the house itself was alive, waiting. Sophia's hand tightened around the rose-shaped pendant Claire had left her, a reminder that nothing here was ever really abandoned. Not even the past. We go in now, she said, voice low. He nodded, instinct telling him that this was the last door they'd ever walk through together. Chapter: The Garden of Lies. The mansion's entrance was a heavy wooden door flanked by columns twisted with ivy. When they pushed through it, the scent of decay hit them. Old wood, damp stone, something unnatural in the air. Inside, it was darker than the outside, shadows gathering like a storm. But Claire had always been one for dramatic entrances. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hall. "Welcome!" a voice called out from the darkness. "Claire!" She stepped into view, dressed in black, looking nothing like the broken woman they'd last seen months ago. This was the Claire they had feared, sharp, calculated, untouchable. Behind her, the boy. He was staring at them, silent, but his eyes, those eyes, his eyes, they were all too familiar. "Meet your son," Claire said, her tone full of cruel satisfaction. He didn't move. Couldn't. The world shifted beneath him. "No," he whispered, stepping forward, but his legs felt weak. His breath felt like stones in his chest. "No, this isn't possible." Sophia's hand shot out to steady him. "What do you mean? Our son?" Claire smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was a wolf's smile. "Not yours," she said. "His." The boy looked at him, then back at Claire. His son. The child she'd told him about in the video. The child she'd kept hidden. All these years, this wasn't just a game. Claire had planned it, every single detail. Chapter: The Final Move. Claire stepped closer, arms outstretched as if presenting a masterpiece. "The truth is simple," she said. "You're not the first man to fall in love with me, and not the first to think he could control me. But I'm not a victim, and I'm certainly not a villain. I've been a survivor." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Everything I've done for him, for my legacy, my future. And now—" She glanced at the boy who was still silently watching. "It's time for him to take the throne." He was still reeling, the weight of her words sinking in like a stone. Her legacy. The twisted legacy Claire had built on lies and power. And now it seemed it had come full circle. Sophia's grip on his arm tightened. "What does he have to do with us, Claire? What's his place in all this?" Claire's eyes glittered. "He is the future, Sophia. Not you. Not him." She gestured toward the boy, and for the first time he saw something different, fear in the child's eyes. The boy was caught in the same web, the same trap of manipulation and control, a product of Claire's obsession with power. And then Claire turned. "This is the part where I give you the choice." Chapter, The Choice. She smiled again, that familiar smile, the one that always held 1,000 secrets. "You can leave now. Take Sophia, take the boy, and forget everything. You can walk away from this. But there's one thing I know for certain." She stepped back into the shadows, leaving only the boy in the light. "You will never walk away from me." The final words hung in the air, sharp as a knife. The air in the mansion felt thick with dread. Every step they took echoed through the hollow walls, a reminder that there was no escape from the game Claire had set in motion. The boy's eyes, those haunting, familiar eyes, locked onto his, as though they held the answer to a riddle that had been haunting him for far too long. And Claire, standing in the shadows, grinned like a puppeteer watching her marionettes dance. For a long moment, he couldn't speak. The truth, if it could be called that, choked him. The boy, the son that Claire had kept from him for years, a weapon wrapped in innocence. She was playing with fire, but she had always been the one who controlled the blaze. Sophia was the first to break the silence, her voice tight but calm. "You didn't bring him here for some fairy tale, Claire. This is just another twisted game of yours." Claire's smile faltered, just for a second. "You think this is a game, Sophia? This is legacy, power. You can try to walk away, but the truth is, he is everything. He's the future." She took a step forward, her fingers brushing the boy's hair as he flinched. It was almost like she had spent years molding him into someone, to carry her twisted empire forward. The boy wasn't just a child. He was the heir to Claire's dynasty of lies. But it wasn't just about power anymore. Not for Claire. This was personal. Claire turned her gaze back to them. "You both should leave. Now. Before I decide to make things permanent." Chapter. Breaking the chain. His pulse hammered in his ears. The words didn't make sense, not the way Claire was saying them. The boy, his son, was standing between them, caught in a storm of manipulation and control that Claire had sown into every aspect of her life. "I'm not leaving without him," he said, voice steady but fierce. The decision had been made before he even stepped foot in this house. He wouldn't leave Claire's legacy to fester, to poison the future. Not like this. Not again. Sophia's hand tightened around his. "We're taking him." Claire's smile was sharp. "You think it's that simple? That you can just walk in here, destroy everything I've built, and take him with you? The boy has been prepared for this. He won't go with you." The boy looked up at Claire, then at him, and for the briefest moment something flickered in his eyes. Fear, real, raw fear. He kneeled in front of him. "You don't have to be part of this, kid." The boy recoiled slightly but didn't pull away. He knew. He wasn't just some innocent pawn. He was being pushed into a role, but whether he accepted it or not was still within his grasp. Claire's voice turned cold. Don't pretend like you have any say in this. You've been nothing but a weapon in my hands. And now, you'll see how a real survivor operates. She was unraveling. He could see it now. She wasn't some cold mastermind anymore. She was cornered, and like all dangerous creatures, she was ready to lash out. Sophia stepped forward. "We're done playing, Claire. This ends now." Chapter. The reckoning without another word. Sophia lunged toward the boy, but before she could reach him, Claire moved faster. She grabbed the boy's arm, twisting it behind him in a brutal grip. "No one leaves here alive unless I say so," Claire hissed, pulling the boy closer to her. A crackle of static filled the air. He looked up, realizing that Claire had triggered something. A trap. "You made the mistake of underestimating me," she said with a twisted grin. The walls began to shift, the sound of machinery humming through the house. Hidden doors opened, revealing armed figures stepping into the shadows. Claire had planned this escape for every possible outcome. She wasn't just trying to take them down. She was setting a trap. Sophia's eyes widened. "It's a kill zone." Chapter. The final choice. He felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him, the walls closing in like they always did with Claire. She never let anything happen without her pulling the strings. But this time, there was no way out. No more manipulation. No more running. His heart raced. There was only one choice left. The boy was still staring at him, confusion and fear mixing in his young face. There was a moment, a single flicker, where their gazes connected. And for a heartbeat, it felt like the boy wanted out. He wanted to be saved. Sophia was beside him now, face hard with resolve. "We're not leaving without him. And you know it." Claire, no longer calm or collected, started to step backward, but she stopped just short of the door. "You think you can break my chain? Do you think you're different from every other man who tried to control me? I made you." He stepped forward, knowing the truth now. He wasn't just going to walk away. "Then you'll watch me destroy everything you built," he said. There was a deadly pause, and then, like a spark to gasoline, Claire snapped. The door behind her swung open, and more armed men poured into the room. He didn't hesitate. He ran. He couldn't explain why, but the boy's eyes, the fear in them, the hesitation, told him what he had to do. The boy wasn't Claire's puppet. Not anymore. With every ounce of strength he reached for, the boy pulling him away from Claire's grasp, and in that moment, everything shattered. The chaos erupted. Gunshots rang out. Shouts filled the air, and for the first time since he stepped into the mansion, he felt alive. Sophia reached them, covering their escape as the boy, his son, tore away from the wreckage, taking that one final step toward freedom. The mansion seemed to groan as if it were alive, the foundations of Claire's world crumbling under the weight of the chaos she had built. Gunfire erupted, but they didn't stop. He kept his grip on the boy's arm, pulling him through the hallways of the mansion, the walls echoing their footsteps. Sophia was behind them, her eyes wide but determined as they sprinted toward the exit. The boy stumbled but stayed close, confusion in his eyes, his breaths shallow and panicked. He wasn't used to running. He was used to waiting for Claire's orders, waiting for her to control him, but not anymore. The sound of heavy footsteps filled the air as the armed men closed in on them, but they kept moving, pushing through the narrow hallways, desperate to make it to the garden gates. Chapter. The Rose. In the garden, when they finally burst through the door and into the garden, the air was thick with the scent of roses. The irony wasn't lost on him. This was Claire's garden of lies, the symbol of her twisted reign. The thorny bushes were thick, their deep red petals now seeming ominous in the fading light of the day. This was where it all began, and this was where it would end. They ran faster, the garden gates just in sight, but behind them, the unmistakable sound of footsteps growing louder. Sophia's breath was ragged, but her eyes were steely. "We have to make it to the Jeep, now." The boy's feet faltered for a moment as he looked back, and in that instant, Claire's voice rang out from behind them, cutting through the air like a blade. "You'll never get away from me. You know that, don't you?" Her voice was full of venom, raw with the rage of a woman who had never truly been defeated. He didn't look back. Instead, he pushed the boy forward, urging him to keep going. "We're almost there. You're not going back to her. Do you understand me?" The boy nodded, but his face was still a mask of confusion and fear. He had been a pawn in Claire's game for too long, and now the world around him was falling apart. They reached the Jeep just as the sound of gunfire rang out. The boy hesitated, looking over his shoulder, but he didn't stop. The moment they were inside, Sophia slammed the door shut and the engine roared to life. Chapter: Betrayal in the Blood. The road ahead was dark and treacherous, but they kept driving. The mansion was soon nothing more than a distant silhouette against the horizon, the chaos still unfolding behind them. In the back seat, the boy sat in stunned silence, his eyes darting between them, trying to make sense of everything. He didn't speak, not even a whisper. The air was thick with tension. Sophia glanced at him in the rearview mirror, her expression unreadable. "We're not safe yet. We'll need to get him to a safe place. Claire will never stop." He nodded, feeling the weight of what had just happened. Claire hadn't just built an empire of lies. She had built a family of them. She had turned the boy into a weapon, and he was no longer sure where the boy's allegiances lay. The boy broke the silence, his voice soft but filled with pain. Is she going to find us? Will she make me go back?" The words hit harder than he expected. The boy wasn't just an innocent bystander in Claire's game. He was a victim. He had been manipulated, controlled, just as he had been. "No," he said firmly, turning in his seat to face the boy. "You're free. You don't have to go back to her. You don't have to be part of this anymore." The boy looked at him, eyes filled with doubt, but something flickered behind them. Maybe a trace of hope. Sophia didn't speak, but she reached over and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it was the first sign of something like care he'd seen in her in a long time. Chapter: The Fall. The further they drove, the more he realized that Claire's empire was more than just a mansion or a web of lies. It was a sickness that had infected every part of his life. He had spent years trying to build something normal, something real, and yet Claire had always been there, lurking in the shadows, pulling the strings. And now he had a son who had never known freedom, never known love outside of the twisted cage Claire had built for him, but freedom came at a price. Claire wasn't going to let them go. She would track them down, no matter how far they ran. She wouldn't let anyone take her legacy from her. He had to make sure they were ready for whatever came next. Chapter: The Reckoning. By the time they reached a safe house in the outskirts of the city, the boy was still quiet, his eyes lost in thought. They hadn't spoken much since leaving the mansion, but the tension in the air was palpable. Claire's reach was long, and she wouldn't let them get away without a fight. Sophia stepped out of the Jeep and stretched, looking around. "We're safe for now, but not for long." He nodded, his mind already racing. Claire wasn't just going to sit back and let him take the boy. She would come after them, no matter the cost. The boy looked at him again, this time with something resembling gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. I don't know what to do." He crouched down in front of the boy. You don't have to know right now, just breathe. You're safe. But deep down, he knew the boy wasn't just running from Claire. He was running from himself, too, a product of a twisted past, unsure of what the future held. He couldn't change the past, but he could give the boy a chance to shape his own future, free of Claire's chains. The safe house felt like a temporary shelter, a brief moment of respite amidst the storm that was surely coming. The walls were thick, the windows fortified, but none of it made the tension in the air dissipate. Inside, the boy sat quietly at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped tightly around a mug of coffee, his eyes distant. Sophia and he exchanged a glance. There was something raw in the boy's silence, something that hinted at the damage Claire had done, not just to the boy's body but to his mind. He had been raised in a house of lies and manipulation. He had been a pawn in a dangerous game, and now he was thrust into a world that didn't come with a manual. He approached the boy cautiously. "You okay?" The boy didn't look up immediately. His fingers twitched around the mug. "I don't know what's real anymore. Everything. I don't know what to believe. Claire. She always told me what to do. She made me do things. I didn't have a choice." The words were heavy, and for a moment, the boy looked at him with an expression that seemed too old for his age. The kid was trapped in a cage that had been built long before he was born. A cage made of lies, control, and a twisted kind of affection. "You do now," he replied softly. "You have the choice. You can decide what you want, who you want to be." The boy seemed to wrestle with that idea, as if the very notion was foreign. He wasn't used to having agency, let alone the freedom to choose his own path. Chapter: The storm is coming. Sophia's voice broke the moment. "We need to make a plan." He turned toward her, watching as she paced the room, calculating. "We can't stay here for long. Claire's network will be tracking us by now. We need to find a way to get the boy out of her reach. We can't let her get to him." Her words were sharp, focused. There was no time to waste, not when Claire's army of loyalists was probably already closing in. "We'll need to move fast. We'll split up. You and the boy take the back roads to the cabin upstate. I'll lead any followers on a wild goose chase. The safest thing right now is to disappear." The plan was risky, but there was no other choice. The boy had to vanish, completely, until they could figure out what to do next. Chapter: The weight of the decision. Later that night, after he and Sophia made the final preparations, he sat down across from the boy. The silence between them was suffocating, both of them grappling with the enormity of the situation. "Hey," he said quietly, "I know this is a lot to take in, but you don't have to do this alone. We'll make sure you're safe. Claire won't get her hands on you again." The boy nodded, though the fear still lingered in his eyes. "I don't know how to do any of this. I don't know who I am anymore." "You'll figure it out," he said, trying to offer reassurance, though he wasn't sure if he believed it himself. "You don't have to be anyone you don't want to be. You have time now. We'll give you that time." Sophia approached then, cutting through the moment with a firm, decisive voice. "We don't have time to talk about who you are. We have time to talk about surviving. We'll get you to safety and then we can figure the rest out. We can't afford to look back." The urgency in her tone made him stand, his heart racing as he glanced out the window, half expecting Claire's men to be circling outside. "All right," he said, turning to the boy. "It's time. Get your things." As the boy moved to gather his meager belongings, he realized just how little the boy had ever been allowed to have. No personal choices, no true life of his own. All of it had been dictated by Claire, down to the last detail. Chapter: The Escape. The Jeep roared to life once again as they drove into the night, heading into the unknown. Every mile that took them further from the mansion was one step closer to freedom. But the air still felt thick with the weight of what they were running from and what was still waiting for them. It wasn't long before he could feel the tension mounting. Claire wouldn't rest until she found them. The boys' safety was their top priority now, and every decision they made had to account for the fact that Claire's reach was longer than anyone could imagine. Sophia drove with laser focus, her eyes scanning the rearview mirror, always alert. "We're almost to the turnoff," she said, her voice tense. "Get ready to move quickly." They reached the narrow back road that would take them upstate. It was their last chance to disappear. As they turned off the main highway, he could hear the soft rumble of an engine behind them, slowly growing louder. "Stay calm," Sophia said, her grip tightening on the wheel. "It's time to make a move." He glanced over at the boy, whose face had gone pale. "You okay?" The boy nodded, but said nothing. "Good," he said, then turned to Sophia. "Get us to that cabin, now." They sped down the narrow, winding road, adrenaline pushing them forward. The jeep swerved as they navigated through the trees. The bow, sounds of pursuit growing louder behind them. They had no time to waste. If they were going to lose Claire's men, they had to act fast. Chapter: The final test. As they neared the cabin, the chase was no longer a quiet affair. Tires screeched, engines roared, and headlights filled the rearview mirror. Claire's men were closing in fast. "Hold on!" Sophia yelled, slamming the gas pedal to the floor. He looked back. The pursuit was relentless, but he knew they were almost there, almost to safety. But safety was never guaranteed when Claire was involved. Claire didn't lose. Not easily, anyway. They reached the cabin, a small, isolated retreat tucked away in the woods. It would give them the privacy they needed, but it wouldn't protect them for long. Sophia skidded to a halt in front of the cabin. They had made it, but just barely. Before he could even react, Sophia was out of the jeep, her gun in hand, eyes scanning the woods. "We need to move! Now!" He grabbed the boy, pulling him out of the vehicle. Together, they ran toward the way. The sound of gunfire shattered the night, the sharp cracks echoing through the trees like a warning. Sophia didn't hesitate. She slammed the door of the cabin shut behind them, locking it with a determined click. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice low but urgent. Her hands moved quickly as she checked the windows, making sure the curtains were drawn and no one could see in. He pulled the boy inside, his heart pounding, every instinct screaming that they weren't safe. The boy's eyes were wide with fear, but he seemed to have shut down, his body frozen in shock. He needed to stay calm. He needed to believe that this could end, that they could get out alive. Sophia glanced at him, her expression tight. "They'll surround the cabin soon. We can't stay here long. We need a plan to lose them." "I know," he replied, his mind racing. "We need to draw them away, split them up, make them think we're somewhere we're not." The boy, still staring at the door as though waiting for it to burst open, whispered, "Are we going to die here?" The raw honesty of the question hit him harder than he expected. He looked at the boy, trying to find the right words. "No," he said, firmly. "We're not going to die here. Not tonight." Sophia turned to him then, eyes sharp with focus. "We need to move fast. I've got a plan, but it's risky. We'll need to use the terrain, the darkness. I'll draw them out and you take—" The boy to the truck. "It's parked a few hundred yards away." He hesitated. "And you?" "I'll be fine," she said, her tone unwavering. "I'm not the one they're after. They want him. All we need to do is make them think he's gone." Chapter: The dark path. He wasn't sure he believed her, but there was no time to argue. The boy was the priority now. Claire's reach could stretch farther than they could imagine, and the moment they lost their advantage, they'd be dead. Sophia grabbed her gun and checked the chamber, the movement swift and practiced. "I'll go first. Wait 5 minutes after I leave, then move. He nodded, though doubt gnawed at him. He wasn't sure if he was making the right choice letting her go off alone, but it was their best shot. She moved to the back of the cabin, disappearing into the dark woods without another word. The door creaked slightly as she pulled it open, and for a moment, he thought he could hear her heartbeat in the silence that followed. 5 minutes. Then, he had to move. Chapter: The Countdown. The clock inside his head seemed to tick louder than any real clock in the cabin. He watched the boy carefully, trying to keep his breathing even, though every nerve in his body was taut with anxiety. They couldn't afford to make a single sound. Claire's men would be closing in soon. He knew that any sign of movement would lead them straight to the cabin. The boy's eyes were wide and full of unshed tears, but his lips were pressed tight. His entire body seemed to be holding its breath. "You're going to be okay," he said quietly, hoping to reassure him. The boy didn't respond. Instead, he just nodded faintly, like a kid who had already resigned himself to the fact that survival was a fleeting hope. Chapter: The Betrayal. As the minutes dragged on, the world outside felt like it was closing in. The sound of branches snapping in the distance set his nerves on edge. It was time. He moved cautiously toward the door, his eyes scanning the darkness outside. Then, just as he stepped forward, the sound of a distant truck engine roared to life. His heart skipped a beat. It was coming from the direction of the main road. A truck meant reinforcements. It was too soon. He didn't think. He grabbed the boy's arm and pulled him into the back corner of the cabin. They crouched low behind a set of crates, their bodies pressed together in the cramped space. The boy's breath came in shallow gasps, but he didn't make a sound. The door creaked again, this time louder, and then the unmistakable click of boots on the gravel outside. It was happening too fast. Claire's men were already here. A shadow passed by the window, and he froze, his entire body rigid. They were just outside. The cabin had no back door, no escape route. If they didn't act now, they'd be cornered. Chapter: The Escape Plan. He turned to the boy, whispering, "Stay here. Do not make a sound." The boy's eyes were wide with fear, but he nodded, clutching his shirt as though it were the only thing holding him together. Then, without waiting for a response, he crawled silently across the floor to a window at the back of the cabin. He cracked the window open just enough to slip through, his body tense with every sound outside. The cold air rushed in as he pulled himself through the opening and dropped to the ground below, his feet landing in the soft earth. He moved quickly, staying low, every sense on high alert. The truck was still getting closer. They couldn't stay put any longer. He motioned to the boy, who was still inside. "We're moving now. Stay with me." He started running toward the tree line, the sounds of pursuit not far behind. They had to keep moving, had to stay ahead of them. Chapter: The Final Confrontation. The woods were dense, the dark foliage slowing them down, but it also gave them some cover. They ran through the trees, his heart pounding in his chest. The truck engine rumbled louder now, and then headlights broke through the trees. They were right behind them. Sophia's voice rang out in his ear, calm and clear despite the chaos. "You're almost there. Keep moving." He didn't hesitate, picking up the pace as he pushed the boy forward. The boy stumbled, but he caught him, pulling him along. Then, suddenly, gunshots pierced the night air. The boy screamed in shock, but they kept moving, ducking and weaving between the trees. The truck screeched to a halt just behind them, and the sound of doors slamming open told him that Claire's men had found them. Sophia's voice crackled in his ear again. "We don't have much time. The roadblock is set. Head straight toward the cabin in the clearing." No. The clearing ahead was bathed in a ghostly light from the moon, casting long shadows across the open space. The cabin stood like a sentinel, its wooden walls weathered by years of neglect. It was the last place they could make a stand. Sophia was already in position, her figure crouched low behind a pile of old logs stacked by the cabin. She raised her hand, signaling for him to take cover near the edge of the clearing. The boy clutched his arm, his body still trembling. But his eyes were locked on the distant headlights. They were closing in too fast. Sophia's voice came through the earpiece again, clear and resolute. "I've set the trap. When they're in position, we move." He nodded but didn't have time to answer. The sound of boots crunching over gravel echoed from behind them. Claire's men were getting closer, their voices muffled but growing louder as they fanned out in search of their quarry. He motioned for the boy to stay low, then turned to look at Sophia. The plan was simple: lead them to the clearing, trap them in the perimeter she had set, and then give them no way out. But it was dangerous, and the risk of them being caught in the crossfire was higher than either of them liked. Suddenly, a shot rang out. Chapter: The First Strike. The bullet whizzed past him, striking a tree trunk just inches from where his head had been a second before. His heart slammed into his chest, adrenaline surging through his veins as he instinctively dropped to the ground. Sophia was already moving. She sprang up from behind her cover, gun drawn, and fired 2 quick shots. The first one hit one of the men who had ventured too close to the cabin. He dropped with a grunt, but the others were all ready. "Returning fire! Move!" Sophia shouted into his earpiece. "Now!" The boy yelped in fear, but he grabbed his arm and pulled him forward. The cabin's door was just a few steps away now. If they could make it inside, they could block it off and hold them off long. Enough for Sophia's trap to spring. They ran, ducking low as gunfire splintered the wooden walls around them. The boy stumbled again, but he caught him, pulling him the last few feet to safety. They reached the door, and he slammed it shut behind them, locking it quickly. Inside, the cabin was dimly lit by the flickering light of a single lantern. Dust hung in the air, and the sound of their rapid breathing filled the room. Sophia's voice crackled in his ear once more, her tone tense. "Get ready. The trap's set, but you've got to hold your ground until they get in position." He turned. To the boy, his face grim. "Stay behind me. No matter what happens, stay behind me." The boy nodded, though his eyes were wide with terror. He could hear the chaos outside, the shouting, the shuffling of boots, and the distinct sound of movement as Claire's men circled the cabin. Then suddenly, a loud crack sounded from the front door. The men were trying to break through. Chapter: The Perimeter, now. Sophia's voice was sharp, and he didn't hesitate. He kicked open the side window, and the light from outside flooded the room. He could see shadows moving quickly in the distance. They weren't expecting an attack from the rear. He pulled the boy closer to the window, his hands shaking as he helped him through the opening. The boy was too small to be noticed, too quiet, but they couldn't risk being seen. Sophia was already in position, firing from her concealed spot behind a stack of broken crates, pushing back against the men who were closing in from the woods. Fessy. Boy climbed out and crouched low, moving toward the trees as instructed. He had to get to the truck, the only way they were going to escape. Meanwhile, he stayed behind, watching the perimeter for any movement. The men had begun to fan out, using the cover of the trees to approach the cabin from all sides. Their goal was clear. They knew they had to flush him out, and once they did, it would be over. But he wasn't going to let that happen. He grabbed a nearby rifle from the wall, steadying his breathing as he aimed out the window at the first figure he could see. He squeezed the trigger. Chapter: The Last Chance. The shot rang out with a deafening crack, and the figure in the distance dropped to the ground with a muffled yell. The others immediately scattered, retreating behind cover. He could hear their frantic shouts as they tried to regroup, adjusting their strategy now that they knew they were under fire. He took another shot, this time hitting a second man in the shoulder. The force of the impact sent him stumbling back, but he managed to stay on his feet, his hands clutching the wound. Blood sprayed across the ground, painting the grass in dark, sticky streaks. The boy had made it to the tree line, just as Sophia had promised. He wasn't looking back. He knew what had to be done, but now the real danger was closing in. Too many men, too many guns. Sophia's voice again, low and steady. "They're getting too close. Make the call now." He had only one choice left. He sprinted for the back door, swinging it open just as he heard the sound of more footsteps closing in. He couldn't let them corner him. Not now. He had one last card to play. A sharp, sudden explosion rocked the ground beneath him. Sophia had triggered the trap. Chapter: The Trap. Springs, the blast was blinding, the sound of it deafening. The earth beneath his feet shook violently and smoke billowed into the air, blocking the view. The men screamed, their voices muffled in the chaos. The ground erupted, sending dirt and debris into the air as Sophia's plan finally took effect. He didn't stop. He ran. The boy was in sight now, a few yards ahead, his tiny legs carrying him faster than he thought possible. He had to reach him. Sophia's gunfire rang out again, her shots cutting through the air, distracting the remaining men who were stumbling to recover from the blast. They were disoriented, but they weren't finished yet. He caught up to the boy just as he reached the truck. The door was already open, and they see. The truck sped through the night, the wheels kicking up dust and gravel as it swerved around tight bends in the road. The wind whipped through the cracked windows, but the boy didn't seem to notice. His face was pale, eyes distant, consumed by the trauma of the night's events. Every now and then, he'd glance over at him, but there were no words, just the heavy silence that hung in the truck like a fog. As the vehicle climbed a small hill, he could see the faint outline of a rundown house in the distance. It was an old family cabin, barely standing, but it had always been a refuge, a place to lay low and think. He needed that now more than ever. "Hold on," he muttered to the boy, swerving the truck off the road and driving toward the house. The headlights illuminated the decaying structure as they approached. It was barely a shelter, but it was better than the wilderness. A place to regroup, to think. The truck came to a jolting stop in front of the cabin, and they both climbed out, making their way inside quickly. He locked the door behind them, the sound of the bolt sliding into place a small but necessary reassurance. Inside, the cabin smelled of old pine wood and dust. The fire pit in the center of the room had long since burned out, but the chill in the air reminded them that this was a place on the edge of everything, the edge of civilization, the edge of their sanity, the edge of survival. He walked over to the small table in the corner, setting down his bag and rifling through it for supplies. The boy was still standing by the door, a nervous energy radiating from him as if he was afraid of the quiet. "Are we safe here?" the boy finally asked, his voice trembling. He paused, looking over his shoulder at the kid. His heart ached. This boy had been through more in one night than most people would face in a lifetime, and now he was caught in the middle of a war he hadn't chosen. "For now," he replied, his voice steady but strained. "But not for long. We can't stay here forever." The boy nodded slowly, as if understanding that truth on some deeper level. He sank into one of the worn chairs by the fire pit, rubbing his face with his hands. There was so much more to do. Too much. And the weight of everything was beginning to settle heavily on him. The boy's safety, Sophia's survival, and above all, the looming figure of Claire. He could hear her voice in his head, sharp, cutting. She's always been like this. He couldn't escape it. the way she'd wormed her way into his life, destroyed it from the inside out. But now, with everything on the line, he wasn't about to let her have the last word. It wasn't just about vengeance anymore. It was about survival, and he wasn't sure if he'd survive without seeing this through to the end. Chapter: The Calm Before the Storm. The cabin was silent, save for the occasional creaking of the floorboards or the wind outside rattling the window panes. It was almost too quiet. He moved to the window, peering through the dusty glass at the darkness outside. The trees surrounding the cabin were dense, cloaking the area in shadows, but there was something off about the stillness. The air felt wrong. The boy had fallen asleep by the fire, his exhaustion finally catching up with him. He didn't have the luxury of sleep, though. He couldn't afford to let his guard down. He reached for his phone and dialed Sophia's number. The line clicked once, then twice, before it went to voicemail. His stomach tightened. She was supposed to check in an hour ago. He paced the room, his mind racing with possibilities. Had something gone wrong? Was she in trouble? He knew better than to assume the worst, but it was hard to ignore the gnawing feeling in his gut. Before he could try again, the faint sound of footsteps outside caught his attention. He froze, listening closely. The footsteps were deliberate, slow. Someone was circling the cabin. He motioned for the boy to stay put, and in one fluid motion he grabbed his rifle from the corner of the room. The footsteps paused at the door. Shit! He was outnumbered, but he had the advantage of surprise. He crept to the window and peered through. A small crack. In the darkness, he could just make out the figure standing near the door. It was too big to be Sophia. It had to be one of Claire's men. He checked the chamber of his rifle, his grip tightening around the cold metal. His heart raced as he prepared to make his move. Chapter: The Enemy at the Gates. The door suddenly rattled, as if someone was testing the handle. He crouched low, his body tense, ready for anything. The man outside would be expecting an easy entry. He didn't know the cabin's defenses, didn't know how well prepared they were. The door handle turned. He waited, heart pounding in his chest, every muscle coiled tight like a spring. The moment the door creaked open, he fired. The shot echoed through the night. The figure outside stumbled, back, a muffled grunt escaping his lips. The man didn't fall immediately, but he was clearly injured. A second shot rang out, this time hitting the man square in the chest. He dropped like a sack of potatoes, his body hitting the ground with a dull thud. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The boy stirred in his seat, rubbing his eyes as he sat up. What happened? Is someone out there? Stay down, he said, voice low and steady. Stay hidden. His eyes remained on the door. He knew there would be more coming. That shot wouldn't go unnoticed, and Claire wouldn't stop until she had him, until she had them. He grabbed his phone again, dialing Sophia's number once more. The phone rang, but this time it wasn't going to voicemail. She picked up on the third ring. Are you all right? He asked, keeping his voice low. I'm fine, she replied, her voice tight. But you need to move. Claire's men are closing in fast. They're looking for you. I know, he muttered, his eyes still on the door. They're already here. We'll be moving soon. Don't let your guard down. I'll be there soon. Just hang tight. The truck's engine roared to life as they sped down the narrow, winding road, the sound of tires biting into the gravel echoing in the empty night. The boy sat beside him, eyes wide, his hands clenched in his lap. Every now and then, he glanced nervously at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights trailing them. But for now, they were alone. The silence between them was heavy, thick with the tension of the unknown. Each turn they made took them farther from safety and closer to whatever awaited them at the end of this twisted road. He couldn't stop, thinking about Sophia, about whether she was really safe, or if this was just another game in Claire's twisted plot. The boy spoke, breaking the silence. Are we really going to make it out of this? The question hung in the air, and for a moment, he didn't know how to answer. The boy had been through too much, seen too much, and yet still held on to a sliver of hope. The same hope he clung to when he was younger. But now, the stakes were higher. The enemies were closing in, and the truth was, he wasn't sure if they'd make it out alive. "I don't know," he said quietly, "but we have to try. You don't have a choice." The boy nodded solemnly, his eyes fixed on the passing darkness outside. Chapter: Betrayal's Shadow. The plan was simple. Too simple. Head for the next town, get as far away as possible, and lay low for a while. He knew Claire wouldn't stop hunting them. She was too smart, too ruthless. Every move they made, she'd be watching. His phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from his thoughts. He glanced down at the screen. It was an unknown number. He hesitated before answering. "Hello?" A cold, familiar voice on the other end sent a chill down his spine. "I see you're still alive." Claire, his heart skipped a beat, but he kept his voice steady. "What do you want, Claire?" "You're running, but you'll never outrun me. You think this ends with you driving away into the night?" Her voice dripped with venom. "You're playing a losing game, and you don't even realize it yet. The moment you think you're safe, I'll be there. You can't hide from me forever." He gripped the wheel tighter, the road stretching out ahead like a dark tunnel with no escape. "If you're so sure, why don't you come and find me?" A cruel laugh echoed through the line. "You're not the one who should be worried, darling." "I'm not the only one coming for you." The phone went dead, and he immediately tossed it onto the seat beside him, rage boiling up inside him. Claire had always been like this. Calculated, manipulative, always a step ahead. But not anymore. Chapter: On the Run. They reached the outskirts of the next town before the first sign of trouble appeared. He wasn't sure if it was coincidence or just bad luck, but the moment they pulled into a gas station to refuel, he saw a black SUV parked at the far end of the lot. His pulse quickened. The boy seemed to sense the change, his eyes scanning the area nervously. "Stay in the truck," he ordered, his voice low but firm. The boy opened his mouth to protest, but he shot him a warning glance. "Now!" With reluctance, the boy slid down into the seat, hiding from sight as he stepped out of the truck and walked toward the station's convenience store. He had to make sure they weren't being followed. He had to make sure no one knew they were here. He moved. Quickly, his eyes flicking back to the SUV every few seconds, trying to spot any sign of movement. But the vehicle remained still, the tinted windows reflecting the harsh neon lights of the gas station. He approached the cashier and, without a word, paid for the gas. He kept his movements deliberately casual, his mind running through every possibility. They couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Claire's men could be anywhere. As he returned to the truck, he caught a glimpse of a man getting out of the SUV. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a military-like walk. The man turned toward the station, eyes scanning the parking lot. It was then that he realized this wasn't just about him. It was about Sophia, too. Claire had sent people to find her, and if they were looking for him, they were also looking for her. He slammed the door behind him, his heart racing as he jumped back into the driver's seat. The boy's wide eyes met his. "What's happening?" "We have to go," he said, sharply, slamming the truck into gear. "Now!" The tires screeched as he tore out of the parking lot, barely missing the black SUV as it revved its engine and followed in pursuit. Chapter: The Chase. The road ahead was a blur of headlights and taillights, a twisting path that led nowhere and everywhere at once. The black SUV wasn't far behind. The pursuit was relentless, each mile stretching out like an eternity. He glanced at the rearview mirror. The SUV was closing in, the driver skilled enough to stay right on his tail, anticipating his every move. He could feel the boy's eyes on him, but he couldn't afford to acknowledge it. "Hold on!" he shouted as he swerved around a tight corner, the truck's tires screeching in protest. The pursuit was getting more dangerous with each passing second. Claire's men weren't playing by the rules. They weren't just trying to stop them. They were trying to kill them. The road was beginning to narrow, and there was no way to outrun them now. His mind raced as he searched for an escape, a plan, anything. Then, in the distance, he saw it. A bridge ahead, an old, rickety structure that looked like it hadn't been used in years. It wasn't much, but it could be their chance. He made the decision in an instant. "Get ready," he said, his voice tight. He slammed the truck's pedal to the floor, speeding toward the bridge with everything he had. Behind them, the black SUV followed in hot pursuit, but it was too late. He reached the bridge just as the SUV tried to make its move, the vehicle skidding on the loose gravel. The bridge creaked beneath the weight of the truck as they crossed, the dark river below swallowing up the sounds of the engine. He didn't dare look back. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, each breath sharp and shallow. The black SUV was no longer visible in the rearview mirror, but the sense of danger still hung thick in the air, like smoke that refused to dissipate. "Did we lose them?" The boy's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of the question. Neither of them wanted to answer. "I don't know," he replied, his hands gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. "But we can't stop now, not until we know for sure." The road ahead was long and dark, the trees lining both sides like silent sentinels. Every twist and turn felt like it could be their last, but they had no choice. The only option was to keep moving. The boy sat back in his seat, his eyes flicking nervously around the truck's interior. But he didn't speak again. The silence between them was suffocating, punctuated only by the sound of tires on asphalt and the occasional crack of a branch in the distance. It felt like a lifetime had passed since the chaos of the gas station, but in reality, it had only been a few minutes. Then, without warning, his phone buzzed again. He reached for it, his heart hammering in his chest. The screen showed an unknown number. He answered it without hesitation. "What now, Claire?" The cold laughter on the other end sent chills through him. "You think you're safe?" she purred. "You're not even close." He swore under his breath. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand," she said, her voice dripping with malice, "that you're playing a game you'll never win. Every step you take, every move you make, I'm right behind you. You've already lost." The line went dead before he could respond, but the message was clear. Claire wasn't going to give up. She would hunt them down until there was nowhere left to run. His grip on the phone tightened. He was done running. He had been running for too long. It was time to turn the tables. Chapter. The plan, as they drove through the night, his mind raced, trying to piece together the scattered fragments of the plan that had to be set in motion. Claire and her men were relentless, but he had something they didn't: information. He knew her tactics, her weaknesses, and he wasn't about to let her outsmart him again. They needed a place to lay low, somewhere no one would think to look. A safe house. A location that was as much a part of his past as the pain of betrayal. His heart clenched at the thought of returning there, but it was the only option. They had to find Sophia and get her out before Claire could make another move. "We're headed to a cabin," he told the boy, his voice steady despite the storm brewing in his mind. "It's a few miles out, off the beaten path. It's isolated. We'll be safe there." The boy nodded, his face pale but determined. He didn't ask any questions, just adjusted himself in his seat and stared out the window. The cabin was an old family retreat. It had been years since he'd visited, but he remembered the place like it was yesterday. It was secluded enough to avoid detection, and it had enough resources to keep them off the grid for a while. If Claire thought she could track them there, she was wrong. But there was one thing he hadn't told the boy. One thing he had been keeping to himself. The cabin wasn't empty. Chapter: Unwelcome Guests. The truck pulled up to the clearing just as dawn's first light painted the sky in shades of purple and orange. The cabin stood at the edge of a dense forest, its silhouette barely visible in the half-light. The world was still, too still, and the moment they parked, he felt it, a presence. "Stay here," he whispered to the boy as he climbed out of the truck. He moved cautiously toward the cabin, his eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of movement. Every instinct screamed at him that something wasn't right. The air was thick with tension. The door to the cabin was ajar. His heart skipped a beat. He approached slowly, the sound of his boots crunching on the gravel far too loud in the quiet of the morning. He reached for the door, pausing just before he pushed it open. Inside, he saw the faint outlines of shadows moving within the cabin. And then he heard it. A low, menacing voice, one he hadn't heard in years. Looking for something? He froze. Claire's voice. But how? How had she found him? The figure stepped into the doorway, revealing Claire herself, flanked by two of her men. They weren't alone. "I told you." Claire's voice was smooth, almost mocking. "You can't hide from me. Not now, not ever." He took a step back, his mind scrambling for a way out. But Claire had anticipated every move. She always did. "You never learn, do you?" she continued, her smile cold and wicked. "This was never just about revenge. This was always about control. And now you're mine." He reached for his gun, but before he could pull it, Claire's men had already disarmed him, their hands quick and efficient. The boy stepped out from behind the truck, his face filled with confusion and fear. "What's going on? What do you want with us?" Claire's eyes flicked to him, and her smile only widened. "Ah, the boy. He doesn't know, does he? All this time I've been playing you, but now it's time to finish the game." The air grew thick with the weight of her words, and for the first time he felt the real sting of betrayal. Not from her, but from himself. He had walked right into her trap. The tension in the air was palpable, almost suffocating. Claire stood there, her smirk never wavering as she surveyed the scene, her men behind her like silent, looming shadows. Her cold eyes fixed on him, watching every movement, anticipating every word. "Tell me, did you really think you could outrun me?" she asked, her voice like ice, calculated and cold. "Did you honestly believe you could escape the mess you made? You think I wouldn't find you?" He stayed still, his hands raised in surrender, but his mind was spinning, racing. He could feel the weight of the gun on his hip. Disarmed now, but the plan was never to escape by force. It was to outsmart her. "You know," Claire continued, stepping closer, her voice dropping into a mocking tone, "I really did admire your tenacity, your belief that you could take me down, that you could somehow win. It was almost charming." Her men flanked her, one of them checking the cabin's perimeter while the other stood behind him, forcing him to stay still. But his eyes never left Claire. He could feel the heat of her gaze as she circled him, like a predator toying with its prey. "You should have known," Claire said softly, "that I always have a backup plan." Backup plan. The words hung in the air and his stomach tightened. This was the moment he had been dreading, the realization that everything he'd done to get this far might have been in vain. "You really thought you were in control, didn't you?" Claire's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through him like a knife. "You thought you could get away with betraying me, lying to me, turning against me. But you were never the one with the power. I was." The cold smile on her face grew. She took another step closer. "I have everything I need to destroy you, to destroy your life, your wife, your family, your business. It's all gone. I've already made sure of that." His breath hitched, his mind racing to process the words. "Sophia," he whispered, but the weight of her name felt like a chain around his neck. "Your precious Sophia?" Claire laughed, the sound full of malice. "She's already taken care of. You really think she's out there safe? Think again. His—" Heart hammered in his chest, a surge of panic rising. "You're lying!" "Am I?" Claire's voice was ice cold. "You've already lost, and now you're going to watch as I finish what I started. I have your family, your life, and soon, your freedom." He stood there, fighting the overwhelming sense of dread creeping up on him. Every inch of him screamed to fight back, to break free, but the words came out quietly, forced. "What do you want from me?" Her eyes glinted, filled with dark amusement. "I want everything. I want your destruction. And then, when you've lost it all, you'll beg me to end it." The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in around him. But despite the fear, despite the tight grip on his chest, a small part of him refused to accept that this was the end. Chapter: The Edge of Desperation. His mind was a blur, adrenaline pumping through his veins as Claire's men closed in on him. He could feel the gun they'd taken from him pressed against his back, the cold metal and uncomfortable reminder that he was at their mercy. But he wasn't giving up. Not yet. Claire had underestimated him before, and he wasn't about to let her do it again. He had one more card to play. Claire turned, her back for a moment, speaking to one of her men in a low, hushed voice. Her confidence in her victory radiated from her, but it was that arrogance, that sense of control, that was her weakness. As she turned away, he felt his hands tremble. He couldn't afford to show weakness. He glanced at the boy standing in the corner, his eyes wide with fear but also a quiet resolve. The boy had seen too much, been through too much to break now. "Get down!" he shouted, his voice sharp and commanding. In the instant that Claire turned her head toward him, he lunged. His movement was a blur, fast, desperate. He shoved one of her men aside, his knee crashing into another's chest, sending him stumbling. Back! Claire's eyes widened in surprise, but it was too late. He grabbed the gun from her fallen henchman, the cold metal heavy in his hand. His fingers tightened around the grip, and for a split second, the world seemed to freeze. "Get in the truck!" "Now!" he barked to the boy. Claire's men quickly regained their composure, but he already had the advantage. The truck was within reach, and the boy was already halfway to the door. "You're making a mistake," Claire hissed, her voice full of venom. "You can't escape me." "I don't need to escape," he said, his voice steady, now holding the gun aimed at her. "I just need to survive." The boy reached the truck, sliding into the passenger seat, but the gunfire came next. The shot rang out, echoing in the quiet morning as the boy ducked down, the glass of the truck's window shattering into pieces. "Go!" he yelled, firing another shot toward Claire's direction to cover their escape. With the truck's engine roaring to life, the wheels screeched as they sped off, tires biting into the dirt road. Claire's furious shouts echoed in the distance, but they were already gone. The boy's hands were trembling as he looked at him, his face pale with fear. "What now?" the boy asked, barely above a whisper. "We keep moving," he said, his voice tight, but his resolve clearer than ever. "We don't stop." Chapter: The Aftermath. The sun was fully risen now, its golden light spilling over the landscape, but it felt like the beginning of something darker. They were on the run again, but this time the game had changed. The stakes were higher, and the sense of urgency weighed on him, pressing down like a storm cloud on the horizon. Claire would never stop hunting them. She would never give up, and her reach was far too vast. But there was something else, something deeper in his bones, that made him hold on to the small flicker of hope. No matter what, he couldn't let her win. The truck bounced over the road, and for a moment,